Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church into the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Now, here's your host, Lauren Richmond Jr.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. This is Lauren Richmond, and today I'm welcoming Ally Henny to the show. Ally is a writer, speaker, advocate, minister, and vice president of The Witness, a Black Christian collective, an organization committed to encouraging, engaging, and empowering Black Christians toward liberation from racism. She completed her MDiv from Fuller Seminary with an emphasis in race, cultural identity, and reconciliation, and she hopes to lead a church someday. Ally has been leading conversations about race on her social media and blog, The Armchair Commentary, since 2014, and her posts reach millions each month. She's also a proud Chicago Southsider. All right, welcome to the show, Ally Henny. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being here. Anything else you'd like our listeners to know about you?
Let me think. No, not really. I think that my bio pretty well covers it. I feel like I'm a pretty boring person. Like, I don't have anything that I'm like, oh yeah, look at this really cool thing that I can humble brag about. Like, it just is like, what you see is what you get. So my bio, I feel like, covers it pretty well. I'm trying, like, sometimes where people ask this, like, I try to think, like, is there anything that's like special or fun or intriguing about me that you normally wouldn't include in a bio like that? And of course, my dog. I forgot that my dog was out.
Yeah,
my dog. So I guess that's something that's interesting.
Yeah,
barking in the background.
Well, for our listeners, we may have dogs and kids jumping in on this podcast, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So I guess that's something is that I have a dog. I have a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Bella, and she's 2 years old. I'm not really sure why she's barking right now. Maybe it's just because I'm talking. I'm not really sure what is going on with her. But she's a really good dog, like a really, really good dog. And she's such a good dog, in fact, that I know, like, she was barking a moment ago. But she's such a good dog that there are times when I forget, not that she exists completely, but it's just like, oh, like, she's so, like, I've had dogs that's like, oh, the dog is quiet. Oh my gosh, what are they doing? Like, what are they getting into?
Yep.
But with Bella, like, it's usually just, oh, she's probably asleep somewhere in the house. And so my husband and I have this running joke that that one of these days we're gonna go to bed and be asleep and hear the dog scratching at our door and, like, completely freak out because we forgot to put her in her crate, because she just she's so chill. She's such a calm and chill dog, and she just kind of walks around and does her thing and is very minimal trouble. And I guess maybe that's the thing that's interesting about me is that I have a dog, and my dog is very good, and she's the goodest girl, and I really enjoy her.
Well, that's great. I have 2 dogs. Neither of them are that well behaved, so I'm glad there are some dog fans here. But as much as we could make this a dog podcast, I should, I suppose, move on rather than complain about my dogs. But share, if you don't mind, kind of about your faith journey, what that looked like in the past and what that looks like today.
So yeah, in the past, faith has always been something that has been a part of my life. I don't really remember a time where, like, I didn't believe, like, I didn't have a moment where it was like, oh, I don't believe and now I do. Faith was something that was just always integral to my life, to the life of my family. Now, that didn't mean that my family, that we always attended church, because that wasn't always the case. We weren't always in church, but my mom, my grandma, my aunties, everyone in my family definitely are what people would consider, God-fearing people, and people of prayer, people of a deep, abiding faith in Jesus. And so that was always part of my life and part of my framework growing up. And then as I became a teenager and a young adult, I've started to discover faith for myself in a way, in a deeper way. And that led me on the path to being in full-time ministry. And so I grew up in a it was a Baptist church. It was a church in my hometown that was founded by the enslaved people that used to live there. And then or the formerly enslaved people that used to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever I was in middle school, my mom and stepdad and I started attending a Pentecostal church in a neighboring town. And so then I stayed with Pentecostalism through middle school, high school, my young adult years and in college and everything. And it wasn't until, I guess it would have been early in 2019 that I started to explore more in a more deeper kind of concerted way the Episcopal or the Anglican tradition. But even my journey with that started in 2017. I guess it would have been. So just right before I entered seminary, I just, was very, I don't want to say disenchanted. That's not the word.
Mm-hmm.
But, I had been involved in some different kind of, non-denominational Pentecostal charismatic churches or Pentecostal charismatic churches kind of with that heritage, but we're kind of, trying to be more kind of mass appeal, non-denominational, blah, blah, blah. And so there was an aspect of where although that expression was and still is very important to my faith, the Pentecostal experience is still very important to my faith. I just kind of felt like, I feel kind of the way that I described it back then was I kind of just, kind of feel unmoored. Like I kind of feel like, I have this faith and there are things that I care about. And there are some resources in my tradition that I can pull on that are helping me and growing me and building me in my faith journey. Yet at the same time, I kind of feel like that being part of church, certainly, like I started feeling in some ways like I was feeding a machine, and in particular, whenever my family connected or reconnected even to the church that we attended, that my partner and I that we attended in college, where it was a very non-denom kind of Pentecostal, but not like really like Pentecostal, but like we're like Pentecostal in the sense of like, we're going to have like extended times of worship and music that we want for people to kind of have good feelings whenever they listen to and kind of have, something like the touchy-feely kind of thing with it, but not Pentecostal in the sense of anything that people would maybe, that wouldn't have a mass appeal.
Sure.
And so I just, started to feel like after a while, like, this kind of, mini mega church wannabe, and, no tea, no shade on anybody if that's your vibe. But it just kind of started this mini mega church wannabe kind of vibe. It just felt like it was feeding a machine. It felt like there was just a lot of kind of, false hype. It just sort of felt like, it's like, every Sunday it's the best Sunday ever. This is going to be the best Sunday ever.
Right.
And, you don't want to miss and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just, and there got to be an aspect where I was just kind of like, why are we here? Like, what is this? What are the things that ground us? And that all kind of, came to a head. And I was a seminary student at this point. And I worked in the ministry that I served in at the church. Of course, I wasn't a staff member at this point. I was just a regular person volunteering in the church. And I was in charge of leading one aspect of a ministry that helped kind of integrate people into the church, and then and really it was a way to kind of be able to like curry and like pool volunteers and stuff for the church. And so there was somebody that I encountered in that you, in order to do that, like you had to sign a statement of faith or whatever at the end of the thing. And so the person was just kind of, she was sort of like, here's a statement of faith. And so a lot of people, they would just sign it like, and the statement of faith is basically like the Apostles' Creed. So, a lot of people would just like sign it and go on about their business. Well, this person was just like, I don't even know what any of this means. And so I was like, bro, okay, you don't know what any of this means. And so she was like, well, I'm not really comfortable like signing this because I'm not sure if I believe any of these things. And so I was like, okay, yeah, respect. Like, I'm glad that you didn't sign this. Like, I'm glad that you weren't just like, hopping on the, like, I've got to serve in the church so I can have friends and be part of the whole thing. Like, that's cool. But then I realized like the church doesn't have there was no mechanism at that time, and I think that maybe they've changed some things now, but there wasn't any mechanism at that time for that person to really even explore any of that. And this is just something like this is the Apostles' Creed. This is like the basic thing that even if you don't say it in church every week, these are just kind of like the basic things that we have historically believed in some shape, form, or fashion as Christians for the last 1600 years. And so it's like. So it's like, bro, like we're doing all this, but like people don't know the basics. And it's like, and I know that woman wasn't the only person, who had been through the course, who had just signed the thing. So anyway, so that just kind of, led to this whole thing. Where then I started, there's so many more stories that I could tell, but it just kind of led me into some exploration and some soul searching. And so through that exploration and soul searching, I was able to find the Episcopal Church. And there was more that happened. There were some events and things that happened that was where I was already headed to, and that was kind of where my trajectory was already going. But there were some things that expedited that trajectory. And so now that's where I am, and that's kind of what my faith looks like now. And I'm still in process of, I mean, it's not like all of a sudden, hey, I arrived in a new denomination. All of a sudden I have all of the answers. Yeah. Absolutely not. Seminary being part of my journey, like whatever, being a theologian and stuff now. It's definitely, theological inquiry. I left seminary with like a lot more questions, than what I came in with, which of course, I feel like if you did seminary right, then that usually is what happened. But so, but I still have, deep faith, in Jesus, and and so that's kind of where I've been and kind of where I'm at right now.
So I'm curious, it's a bit cliche perhaps at this point, at least in my mind maybe, of deconstructing or reconstructing kind of ex-evangelicals or folks finding a home in the Episcopal Church. And I'm just kind of curious, like even someone as a big name as like Rachel Held Evans or a few people I have known, what do you think it is about like the Episcopal Church, kind of their version of Christianity that is appealing? I'm curious.
That's a great question. I can't necessarily speak for everyone's experience, but I think that for me, as someone, I would not consider myself an ex-evangelical. It's kind of, Pentecostals are kind of like technically, now, well, technically they've always been evangelical. Now, like since the 2016 election, there's been a lot of consolidation kind of in terms of like church politics and stuff. There's been some consolidation, but Pentecostals have never really self-identified as evangelical, even though like the Assemblies of God, which is like the largest Pentecostal denomination in the United States, was a founding member of the NEA, of the National Evangelical Association. Just Pentecostals just typically just have not ever really identified with evangelicalism. And so then myself also being a product of the Black church, I just that hasn't really ever been my personal my personal like way of looking at it. But I definitely would say that I have been that I have been evangelical adjacent and spent some time in evangelical adjacent Christianity. And so there's a lot of similarities and stuff there. And so I think that for me, it was the fact that the Episcopal Church in general kind of feels like a big tent. And it's not that the Episcopal Church doesn't have beliefs or doctrines, or doesn't have certain ways that they think about, ways that we think about and do things. But there's also room for people. There's room for fellowship and connection and stuff across difference. And so, there are some people that talk about, the broader Anglican tradition kind of being what some people might call like a via media, kind of a middle way, between all of these sort of different traditions. So between, Catholicism, between the more kind of Reformed branch, between, Orthodoxy, between the charismatic movement. It kind of, the tradition kind of sees itself as a middle way, and there might be some people that kind of fall in different places within some of those spectrums or whatever. And so in the Episcopal Church, all baptized believers can receive communion, and so it's not there's not necessarily the litmus test, or at least in my experience, there's not the litmus tests, because you might have a bunch of people together, and people might see things in the scripture differently. They might see things as it relates to tradition or things like that. We might see those things differently, but we're all able to kind of come together and worship together. And so I think that coming from a tradition like Pentecostalism, where there's not as much, and I think that I can generalize this also to what I know of evangelicalism, that oftentimes there's not as wide of a berth for what you can believe, or what is acceptable, or it's sort of like, you have to, it's not that at some places you have to accept everything that the church teaches. And if you don't accept it, then like people are going to look at you like you're sus. There are some and my experience has more been, and I'm talking in terms of like Pentecostalism. Like there are some, Pentecostal evangelical churches where you have to believe every single thing. They got a list of beliefs, and you got to believe everything the way that they say that you got to believe it. And if you and there's not any room to question it, because if you question it, then there's heresy. I've had the fortune of being part of churches that weren't necessarily that rigid, but there was still sort of like, even if there wasn't the rigidity, there was still the there were often sometimes even cultural expectations, and even sometimes like those cultural expectations. I have been in churches that the church's culture was different than like, being a leader in the church is like, this is what the leadership team, this is what we believe, this is what we think. But then the people out there, there's people out there that believe something completely different. So, I served in a church that the staff, was all like, I think pretty much everybody on staff was egalitarian and was like, women serve in ministry, whatever. But then there was a whole like slew of complementarians out in the congregation, and it's like, what? And sometimes there would be interesting conversations and that type of thing. But I think that the Episcopal Church sort of, at least again in my experience, in my limited experience with the Episcopal Church, you don't have that. And so I think it feels good to feel like, oh, you can come into some place and you can have, Jesus, or you can have the stories and different things that you're familiar with. And so it feels familiar, but it's also different enough, and there's also room to explore, and there's room to disagree, and there's not, it's not dogma. And so I think that's why that is so appealing to so many people.
Awesome. Well, it is interesting kind of just to see that dynamic, and I appreciate your perspectives there. It's interesting about that middle way, or the big tent you describe. Well, let's talk about, so I brought Ally onto the show just to kind of talk about, why she has not given up church. Ally is the author of a new book that's out called I Won't Shut Up, Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But I first kind of wanted just to get your thoughts. I'd seen on social media a post you made, I think a couple months ago, maybe as we're recording this, something about why you hadn't given up on the church. Like me, I imagine you see many people who have given up on the church. And I'm just kind of curious, like you post some things here, or you listed some things where there's brokenness, you see opportunities for repair. I'm kind of summarizing here, where you feel the Spirit's presence when others think the Spirit is gone. Or others see or want righteous indignation, you see a need for refining fire. Talk about that. Like, what kind of keeps you in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I certainly, and I think a lot of us, have had, I've been given every reason to walk away, if not from the Christian faith, at least from the organized institutional church. I'm a survivor of spiritual abuse. I've seen just a lot of nonsense and experienced a lot of nonsense. And so for me, I see the church as a place where the Spirit is moving, and where the Spirit has the potential to move, and where the Spirit can move and is moving and has the potential to move even outside of the confines of the institutional church. And so I think that I see church in terms of potentiality. I see that the church, it is something that can provide people with a sense of community. And again, yes, you can get a sense of community. Like, it's not that the church, the things that I'm saying aren't things that are like that somehow the church is just like, unique and special, and this is special little snowflake type of thing. But I think that whenever we're talking specifically around belief, that's the church's wheelhouse. It's belief, it's faith, it's spirituality. And too many times I think that churches try to be a bunch of other things that they're really not. And so I think that our spirituality, our faith, that then motivates us to do good works in the world and motivates us to be able to mobilize and that sort of thing. I'm just like, this is something where people can gather, where people can build a sense of community with one another. It's a place where people can deeply reflect on the matters that on the things that matter to them, on matters that are dear to their heart. And again, these are all things that, yes, you can do that at home. You can do that in nature.
Right.
You can do that at your local bowling alley. And so I'm not necessarily, trying to pitch something, but what I'm saying is that, this is an institution that, that it can provide things for people in a way that you don't necessarily get, and I think that sometimes, I'll say it this way, I think that sometimes, because unfortunately I think that the issue sometimes is that the church has always kind of touted itself, whenever people said, "Oh, no perfect people welcome."
Right.
Really, like, what the church has set itself up as often is this place of, it's like these people who are high and mighty and better than everybody else, and like we're the cool kids, we're the group of people who we are superior to you in some way, so we're going to try to dictate to the world how they should be. We're going to try to dictate to the world how morality should be. We're going to dictate to the world how education should be. We're going to dictate all these other different things to the world. And so I think that sometimes it's hard for us to imagine church that isn't that. It's hard for us to imagine church outside of colonialism. But whenever I draw on my own life and experience and knowledge of my own Black church tradition, where the Black church was a place, it was a community center. It was, even in the little small town that I grew up in, it was a place that was a fixture in our community. It was a place where we gathered. I mean, I had multiple wedding showers, as I think a lot of people do, but one of my wedding showers was at the hall they called it the Shepherd's Hall, of my local Black church. And so it was, and we didn't even attend that church. My mom, we hadn't attended that church, in years. But like, we were still welcome to have an event there. I think my mom also hosted an event. One of my aunts had earned a degree, and she had hosted an event for her there. And so it is the church, because we have all these buildings, we have all these different things, that the church can provide resources within the community. Again, not from a place of, hey, we're high and mighty and better than you, but the church can provide a place for people to be able to ask questions. I think that the church can to ask spiritual questions. The church can provide a place for people to be able to gather, to be able to mobilize. And so I think that where a lot of people struggle is because churches have placed themselves as like the end all, be all, cure all, in all, above all, everything. And that isn't it. And so I think that the future of the church is not us sitting high and mighty up on our high horse, pointing down at everybody and being like, looking down our noses at people and being like, whatever, but it's us actually being involved in our communities, using our resources, pooling our resources together. So, in terms of, you are a member of a church, you are giving tithes and offerings, and those monies are going into the work of the church, and the work of the church not being like, oh, look, we're gonna buy a nice LED screen, and isn't this gonna be great, or oh, we gotta do some landscaping, and so we're gonna spend, like, I mean, yes, you got to do building maintenance, obviously, right. But like, instead of it being like, oh, yeah, we raised all this money so we could buy a fancy camera and all this other type of stuff, it's like, no, that money going into like you go someplace, you're pooling your money with a bunch of other people, and then those funds are going into the community, and they're going to build, they're going to help unhoused people. It's going to feed people. It's going to meet whatever needs are existing in your community. And so that's kind of what I mean when whenever I say that, I haven't given up on the church just because I see potential in what the church can do in the world, but then also what the church can do for us as ourselves. Again, yes, you can go in nature, you can sit at home and have awesome prayer times or whatever it is. But I think that there's something that forces us to be a bit more intentional and reflective whenever we carve out sacred space. And I'm being intentional in how I say that because not everybody is able, and especially, in this pandemic era, not everybody is able to enter into a physical building. Not everybody is able to enter into a physical building because of their neurotype, because of disability, because of there's so many different factors. So whenever I say church, I don't necessarily mean, a big building with a steeple in your neighborhood with a corner on the corner. I think that church can look many different ways. And so it doesn't, church can be, and I've been there before and I've done this, but church can be gathering with people in your living room. And discussing and opening up the scripture and praying and reading and reflecting and meditating. I don't want to seem, hung up on, well, it's got to be this particular way. It doesn't have to be that way. Church can be some friends gathered together again in a space, but it's carving out a space and things that feel sacred,
right?
And that feel holy. And so then, to me, the institution of the church, then denominations and not all of them, but the function that different churches and fellowships and denominations and stuff can serve, I think, is recalibrating, not toward empire, not toward, we're going to have 15 campuses. We're going to, have a bunch of satellite campuses and the pastor's face is going to be projected, across the state or across the city or whatever the geographical region is. And not feeling like, oh, well, we've got to, have all these different churches and all these different things or whatever, but just what are some ways that we can get together as an institution? And again, we're pooling resources, we're pooling spirituality, we're pooling all these things together, and we're serving people. And if anything, I mean, this isn't the best comparison in the world, but in some ways, the church could be a service organization, a spiritual service organization for that makes a difference in people's world. And so I think that we have to kind of think a little bit differently. And even that might even mean kind of managing some of our squeamishness about certain things. And I know that not everybody is called. You are called into the space in which you were called. And so, I'm not saying like, well, if you are somebody who has left the institutional church, you're wrong. You need to, go back and blah, 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 blah. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that like, there are the Spirit of God is still there, is still in some of those places. And I just, I think of like the story of God breathing on the dry bones, and making an army and building an army out of dry bones. And so, I realize that it's not everybody's desire, it's not everybody's experience. There's some people that your experience is your experience, and sometimes you're not able to see past your own experience because those things were so deep for you, and that's okay. And I'm just kind of here and just kind of sticking around because I see the potential for something. And, and it's like, I don't know what will happen. I don't know, maybe I'll waste, I'm 38 now, maybe, I'll waste the next, 30 or 40 years of my life in this place. Maybe I'll waste the next 10 or 20 years of my life and then decide maybe I'll waste the next 5 years and be like, oh no, I shouldn't have. And maybe it'll be a waste. And maybe at some point I'm like, oh, I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my time. I don't need to be part of this. But that's where I feel, that I'm at, now. That's where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And what I'm hoping to see and what I'm hoping to build and to change and to break down and to reform.
Yeah. So this kind of relates to something that I found in your book. Again, the book is I Won't Shut Up, Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. You had a quote in there, something that said that you stayed Christian, and I think I'm paraphrasing here. You stayed Christian because you don't blame Jesus for white people's behaviors. And I found that, I guess that quote stood out to me because I think it was a theme that I found a real, at least from my perspective, it felt like you really had a wisdom and nuance in the book, that I see here kind of in this conversation, or I guess here in this conversation. Are you willing to kind of talk more about that quote and, how that's informed your decision making, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, so as a Black American, a common objection that people raise, it doesn't matter what race they are, but a common objection that people raise is, well, wait a minute, you're Black American, your ancestors were enslaved. Why on earth would you participate in the religion that enslaved your ancestors? And, I've done study on this in this area. I've studied the religion of enslaved people and the things that they did and the reasons why they worshipped. And there's an aspect of that argument. There's an aspect of that argument that kind of rubs me a little bit because I feel like that it treats enslaved people like they didn't have a mind of their own. And so and you'll say things like, oh, well, the religion was beat into them and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But so there's text and there's like subtext and stuff there where it's like, people had their own religions. Christianity, typically where people were stolen from in Africa. Christianity had not necessarily proliferated there a lot outside of some of the colonization. There were some people, were people on the continent of Africa who were Christians, and Christianity was spread across the continent of Africa. But sometimes people get into like, oh, they were Christians before they were, and that's a little bit disingenuous. Christians existed among a pantheon of religions on the continent of Africa. And so the people who were enslaved and who were stolen from the continent, some of them, like, yes, they were, they were required to practice Christianity in a way. But then those same enslaved people who, yes, the people, handed them a slave Bible and tried to teach them all this stuff. And sometimes they had to attend church and stuff, with the master or whatever. A lot of enslaved people, most of them even probably rejected that. They rejected the religion of their slave masters. And there are some Black people who were they were just outright like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with anything Christian because I don't no, I that's they're using that to justify enslaving us. I'll show up at the thing, but I'm not getting involved.
Yeah.
But there were some who, even though the enslavers' behavior indicated one thing, they had a knowledge and an experience with the divine that they took, not the slave owning, slave justifying, that type of thing. They didn't take that.
Right.
But they took the stories of Moses in the Exodus. They took all these different, Daniel in the lion's den, Ezekiel with the dry bones. They took these stories, they took these narratives, they took these ideas, they took Jesus, and they took these things into their own secret places, and they worshiped in their own secret places, and they integrated aspects of their cultural religion, of things, of cultural, things that they brought with them, but also cultural memory was integrated, and they created this. So it's like, yes, on the surface, maybe, yes, we believe in Jesus. The white people believe in Jesus. The Bible is the source of our faith, and the source is the Bible of the white people's faith.
Right.
But my faith as a Black American, my Jesus isn't white, straight American Jesus.
Yeah.
Like it's not. And it's one of those things that yes, some of it is the difference between dawn and between dusk and night, but there is it's not necessarily night and day. Some of it is night and day, but it might be the difference between twilight, dusk, and midnight. But there are shades. There are things that's kind of, it's like using the same language. It's like using the same words, but those words carrying a completely different meaning and conveying a completely different meaning. So for me, the Jesus that I worship is a brown-skinned man, is a dark-skinned man who was executed by the state for crimes that he didn't commit, who was lynched and held up be made a spectacle of the world. That is the person that is the Jesus that I identify with. I don't identify with the Jesus of empire, of always having to be on top, of always having to wield power and have power. I identify with the God who saw the people who were down and out, who saw the people who were on the margins, and brought them from a mighty long way. I worship the God that was with the Hebrew people in Exodus and was bringing them out from their oppressor. So again, white people, yes, they also have Exodus in their Bible, and they read the Exodus, but it's like, unless you have the experience, you don't see how, and unless you have both experiences, you don't really see how different they are. And I understand, there's Black people that raise objections, and a lot of times, Black people's objections are but they enslaved us, whatever, we don't, and I get that, and I'm not gonna yuck other people's yum. Sometimes it's also because, unfortunately, even though, and I think we could say this also, using the Exodus again, the Hebrews got out of Egypt, the Israelites got out of Egypt, but Egypt didn't always get out of them. Yeah. And so they wandered in the desert, for multiple generations until they were finally able to see the promised land. And so for some of us as Black Americans, we left the plantation. We were able to leave the plantation, but the plantation didn't leave us. Yeah. And the plantation and different things got handed down. And so, it morphs into different kind of things that oppress people within our community. It morphs into some things that can kind of be ugly, that then kind of that then does maybe look like the white man's religion a little bit, and oppresses different people. So I don't want to let Black religion off scot-free, because there are a lot of Black people who have a lot of valid critique of the Black church tradition, and I have a lot of critique of the Black church tradition. But then to the point of them making in the book that it's like, I have remained Christian because I have found in Christianity spiritual resources that have helped me to be an advocate for justice, to be a person that stands up what is right. Now, I am not it's not, I don't want to sound like, well, I'm only a good person because I read the Bible and blah, 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 blah. That is not what I'm saying. Yeah. But I'm saying that for me, I found spiritual resources. I found things in the traditions of the church, in the scripture, and different things that empower me. And other people might find it other places, but for me, it's like I have found these things, and these things are what fuel my practice of justice. And so it's like I don't want to seed something. I'm not going to seed something that gave my ancestors that my ancestors are out here, fighting oppression. They're living through Jim Crow. They're living through enslavement. They're living through all these different things. I am not going to throw something that helped them get over away just because some white people show their behinds. Like I'm not gonna do that. And so, racism, homophobia, all that type of stuff, that's white Jesus nonsense. And that's not, and so I'm like, no, I'm gonna identify and with the spiritual practices, with the ideas, with the things that resonate the most with the Christ that I see, who is on the side of the marginalized, who is on the side of people who are being oppressed, who lifts the lowly people and sends the proud-hearted away empty-handed. And so that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, we should probably leave it there just for sake of time. The book is, again, I Won't Shut Up: Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. I assume available where all books are sold, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And if it ain't there, you can order it.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's take a quick break and come back with some closing questions. All right, we're back with Ally Henny. Thanks so much for your time and for your perspectives here. So let me leave you with some closing questions here. I always tell folks you can take these as seriously or not as you'd like to. But if you're Pope for a day, what might that day look like for you? What would you like to accomplish?
Oh my goodness. So like if I was like the Pope, like the Pope, okay.
Sure.
So like if I was the Pope, I would be like, okay, all these like people, all these pedophiles and stuff, like in the Catholic Church, like y'all gotta go.
Yeah.
Like y'all gotta go. Not quick, fast, and in a hurry. Like you're done. Where's the list? You done, you out. And so that's probably the first thing that I would do. The next thing that I would do is be like, oh hey, queer people, like whatever, y'all okay here, like trans people, like y'all good, like y'all can come in here, y'all can take communion. I would also be like, yeah, women, like or whoever, whatever your gender expression is, like yeah, you can be like priests, like we don't care up in here. Let's see, what else would I do? This is my theology nerd self. I would also be like, yeah, let's reunite Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church. Let's do that. Okay, you know what? Y'all was right about the filioque clause. Like the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and not the Father and the Son. Double procession. We don't have to have that. Okay, we coming back together because double procession subordinates the Holy Spirit to the Son, and that's not how that's supposed to work. But anyway,
look at you dropping some. There you go. I love that.
Yeah, that's just putting that MDiv to use here. Let's see. I would also be like, okay, we're gonna like use all this money that we have, or if we don't like, or that we think that we have, and we're gonna start like feeding poor people and hungry people, and like making some differences in some of these places. And then like we're gonna shame people, and not like shame them like like real shame, but we're gonna like shame billionaires, be like shame on you, give your wealth, like whatever. And I'm not really sure like what all the Pope does, but like I'm straight up like, okay, billionaires, like give your money. Like you won capitalism, good for you. And like pain and like shame on y'all for climate change. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure what the Pope does. So I'm just like, I would try to change as much stuff as I could to make the world as good for like as many people as I could. And then I would probably just like blow the thing up and be like, okay, yeah, no more popes. Okay, cool, I'm done.
Well, they might feel that way after you're done. So, I mean,
maybe they would like, but I'm the Pope.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do about it? Probably nothing.
Right. A theologian or historical Christian figure you'd want to meet or bring back to life?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to bring any of them people back to life. Like, I don't know if I'm trying. Let me think. I mean, because so the good people who's dead, like the ones, you know, who was really walking with Jesus. I mean, they in heaven. So like, why am I gonna? Why it's like Samuel. Like whenever Saul was all like,
story.
and then Samuel like with the witch of Endor, and then Samuel comes up and is like, why were you bothering me? I was just fine where I was at. So I feel like that the people who like were good, like they are in like the right place. Now there's maybe some of these like enslaving theologians and that type of stuff who like I would probably like resurrect them just so somebody could like run up on them and be like, or just be like, oh look, your worst fears have happened. I don't know. I probably wouldn't. God wouldn't want me to probably be petty. I mean, God probably doesn't care that I'd be petty. But I can't think of anybody like right now who I would be like, yes, on site. I feel like I had somebody in seminary that was like, oh yeah, if I meet this dude, it's on site.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel like I have anybody right now that it's on site with. But a lot of the people, like I would just leave them like where they're at and hope that they're like in the bad place and not in the good place.
What do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
Ooh, child. You know, I'll flip that question.
Sure.
I think that there's a lot of dookie that there's a lot of like terrible crap that they're gonna remember. I hope that what they remember, besides like all the dookie, is I hope that history doesn't forget the good people that stood up against and spoke out against all this stuff, and that our history doesn't become like this spectacle of there was all this weird unprecedented stuff that happened, but the people were like, yeah, you know what, there actually were people who were actively trying to make the world a better place and not garbage for everybody.
Yeah. And I feel like I have to add this, at least I'll say this for myself here and for listeners not quite with it as me. I had to look this up, Ally, when you said this. On-site means that when you have beef with somebody, you automatically fight them. So I'm not as hip as you, so I had to look up what you meant when you said on-site. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, that's what I'd be like somebody who I would fight, who would catch these hands, who I would fight. And there's not anybody that I can. I mean, there's some people that probably deserve it, but there's not. But there's not anybody. You know what? And people are gonna get mad that I'm gonna say this, but actually, it's gonna be. It would be. I won't say it won't be on site with Paul, but I'm gonna be like, okay, Paul, Paul, like, first of all, bruh. You needed to learn how to use paragraphs and commas and to separate your thoughts out a lot better, because a lot of people did you intend this? Like did you here is what people did with your words. And so was that are you okay with that? And if you're okay with that, okay, then all right, like we got a box. But what I feel like, because I had a professor in seminary who really redeemed the book of Romans and Paul for me in a lot of ways, that was like, oh, okay, because I think that Paul gets grossly misinterpreted, and so I want to get, since you know I am not like a Greek historian, I'm not a Greek scholar, I want to give Paul a chance to speak for himself and to be like, this is what I meant. And then like, if he was being garbage, then okay, we're going to fight. But I don't think he was being garbage, but I would be like, okay, let me write this down and be like, see, look, y'all were wrong.
All right. So, that's good. What's your hope for the future of Christianity?
I hope that Christianity becomes thoroughly divested of power and of being the people that have to be on top and have to be the whatever. And I really hope that we return not in like this, the way that people are always like, oh yeah, we're going to return to the ancient ways.
Yeah.
We're going to return to the ancient paths and do church just like they did in the book of Acts. Like, that's not like, no, not that bull. But like, I hope that, and people are going to get mad, people might get mad about this, people might love this, but I hope that we come so thoroughly to the end of ourselves and that everything that is not God is laid bare and is laid out there for everybody to see, and for the people who are doing the most harm and who are doing the most harm in God's name, that those people no longer have a place, and that they are sent away, like, again, the proud-hearted, the rich, whatever, that they are sent away hungry, so that the rest of us, and I'm not saying that, like, the rest of us perfect people who aren't sinners and never mess up. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying, like, the people who are actively out here doing doo-doo, not like, hey, I messed up because I'm a person. I hope that those people just kind of decide that they don't, that whatever happens, and they kind of decide that they don't want to identify with Jesus anymore, and that the people who really are trying to be Jesus in the world do it, and are doing it without the power, without the empire, without all this other type of stuff, and that we're there because of that.
All right. Share with our listeners where folks can connect with you or find out more about you.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. It's just my name.
Mm-hmm.
You can find my name. It's a public page. I'm on TikTok sometimes. I look at TikTok more than I post videos right now, but I post videos on TikTok. I have a blog called The Armchair Commentary that I haven't posted to in a long time, but I always pump it up because one of these days, I might post something out there, and I don't want y'all to miss it. I also have a Substack that doesn't really have anything on it, but again, it's just allyhenny.substack.com or whatever. Again, I've not posted to that recently, but again, I might, so I don't want y'all to miss it. I'm also on Patreon. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Threads.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Threads.
Yep. I'm on Threads. If You Black, I'm on Spill. I'm also on Twitter, and we're going to keep just calling it Twitter like it ain't whatever that dude is trying to call it. It ain't that. Yeah. But I mean, that's going down the toilet. So, I mean, I have an account there. I occasionally get on there to see like what's happening, but I'm not really like on there anymore. But yeah, so that's where you can catch me. And then of course you can buy my book wherever books are sold. And if it ain't there, then if it ain't where you trying to buy it, then ask them to buy it for you so it can be there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. Always leave folks with a word of peace. So may God's peace be with you.
And also with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. To learn more about Lauren or the podcast, visit future-christian.com. One more thing before you go. Do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. And if you're feeling especially generous, leave a review. It really helps us get the word out to more people about the podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is a production of Torn Curtain Arts and Resonate Media. Our episodes were mixed by Danny Burton, and the production support is provided by Paul Romig-Levitt. Thanks, and go in peace.